The November 25th, 2020 meeting of the Environment and Public Works Committee will now come to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ansello.
Here.
Mr. Ansello is present. Mr. Baroff.
Here.
Mr. Baroff is present. Mr. Brew.
Here.
Mr. Brew is present. Mr. Dondorfer.
Here.
Mr. Dondorfer is present. Mr. Mafucci.
Here.
Mr. Mafucci is present. Mr. Marionetti.
Here.
Mr. Marionetti is present. Mr. Udelson.
Here.
Mr. Udelson is present.
We will need to suspend the rules of the legislature for the purpose of prohibiting public in-person attendance in accordance with Executive Order 202.1, which was extended through December 3rd by Executive Order 202.72. You have a non-debatable motion on your agenda, which needs a maker and a second.
So move, Legislator Brew. Second.
Moved by Legislator Brew and seconded by Legislator Marionetti. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The item carries. At this time, I'd like to recognize Legislator Paul Dondorfer.
Thank you, Chairman Ansello, for stepping in today. I had a little COVID exposure at work the other day, so I am erring on the side of caution, waiting for my test results to come back, and didn't want to come into the office and get everyone infected. So, well, hopefully not infected, but that is why Chairman Ansello is taking the helm today, and I'm staying behind my computer screen where it's safe for everybody.
Okay. Thank you, Legislator.
Indeed, thank you.
Is there anyone signed up for the public forum?
There's no one signed up for the public forum, nor were any written comments submitted in advance of the committee meeting.
Okay, thank you. And at this time, I'd like to wish Legislator Udelson a happy birthday. Happy birthday, Legislator.
Thank you very much. Are you going to sing, Mr. Chairman?
No, you don't want me to sing, no.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right, you're welcome. Okay, at this time, I'd like to introduce Robert Franklin, the Chief Financial Officer of Monroe County, who's here to present the proposed 2021 Monroe County budget as it pertains to the Environment and Public Works Committee. And then we'll have a questions and answer period following his presentation. Mr. Franklin, you have the floor.
Well, thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Jack, do you mind allowing me to share my screen?
Should be all set.
Thank you. And thank you again, Mr. Vice Chairman. So tonight's 2021 budget presentation to the Environment and Public Works Committee. There we go. Most of you have seen a pie chart like this before in some of the other presentations. After chargebacks, EPW accounts for roughly 7% of Monroe County's total budgeted spending for 2021. And while I know some people may think 7% sounds just kind of small, it does represent almost $119 million of spending dollars. So where are we spending that $119 million? It's basically in our Department of Aviation and our Environmental Services Department. And within DES, a large portion is, of course, attributable to our Pure Waters Fund, which represents about $77.5 million of the overall appropriations. If I can just take a minute to look at our Department of Aviation. For those who may be new or listening, just to be clear, this is not the airport. This is our enterprise fund, our Department of Aviation. The airport is managed by the Airport Authority, but they lease all their county staff and operations from Monroe County, so it's accounted for here. So I think also, while everyone realizes air travel is down, honestly, whether it's 100 flights a day or 10 flights a day, we still need security. We still need the ability for firefighting, and we still need to keep our runways and taxiways open and to keep our building clean and sanitized. So overall, appropriations really don't look a whole lot lower than what you might think they should. But I will point out, Airport Administration has reined in their costs by over $550,000, as well as their field operations and building operations, commensurate with the reduced amount of traffic. I'm not presenting revenue on this particular slide, really just for the lack of real estate, and I want this to still be readable. I will note for you that because the Airport Authority reimburses Monroe County for all of its operating and debt service costs, revenues equal expenses. So the bottom line is zero. Looking to environmental services, and in particular our solid waste fund. Appropriations for solid waste are increasing by just under $300,000. That includes what I would categorize as a one-time cost for catching up on a bunch of deferred maintenance at our refuse recovery facility and our recycling center. And that deferred maintenance that we're catching up on amounts to about $575,000 in this budget. Regarding revenues and net county support, somebody asked about this last year, so I wanted to mention it in this presentation. When you look at the revenue details for solid waste in the back of the budget book, it looks like tipping fee revenue is declining, and it is, but it really is because we made it that way. Solid waste is an enterprise fund. All funds are a self-balancing set of accounts in which fund revenues must equal fund expenses. So in balancing this fund, we actually reduced tipping fee revenue in order to force a required net county support of $2 million. We started doing this with the 2020 budget because the solid waste fund is, well, it has a terrible net deficit position, and we need to begin turning this around sooner than it can turn around itself. I've talked about this every year in my budget presentation since 2016. Director Mike Garland and I, mostly him, worked hard developing a plan to turn around solid waste operations, and it has been working. Prior to 2015, the solid waste fund had been losing anywhere from $2 million to $3 million each year. But since 2015, and after implementing all the changes that Director Garland worked through, the solid waste fund has had now 5 consecutive years of operating surpluses, the last 4 of which have also improved its year-end net position. So while that is great news, the one and only thing the comptroller got right in their last audit report is that at the current pace, it's still going to take about 35 years to crawl our way out of this hole that was dug. So we really need to speed up this process. And we need to speed it up for the benefit of the enterprise fund, for the betterment of the general fund, and honestly, for the betterment of the county's credit position. Like I mentioned yesterday about MCH, our investors and our credit rating agencies really don't like it when the general fund has to subsidize enterprise funds, but it really is more palatable when that subsidy is part of a strategic plan for financial improvement. If I can look briefly at our engineering, facilities, and fleet operations, appropriations are about $500,000 lower than the 2020 amended budget, but there are bigger ups and downs, and you'll see those throughout the budget book, really in the facilities budget. For example, last time at this year, I noted a significant cost increase in our contract to run the Iola Powerhouse. This year, it's the opposite. DES worked with our contractor, Siemens. They operate the Iola generators, and they really worked hard to significantly reduce that contract by about $1 million. Part of that is due actually to having MCC go off on their own, and they're now going to maintain their own generator, or combined heat and power plant. On this slide, you'll notice revenues are also lower. So I want to note a planned use of fund balance within our facilities operations. Collectively, our building accounts have about a $13 million unrestricted net position. Also, most of you probably call that fund balance. So it's $13 million unrestricted fund balance on a gross operating budget before chargebacks of $30 million. So the plan is to use $1 million of unrestricted fund balance each year until the fund balance falls to about $6 million, or 20% of their operating expenditures. Looking at our Pure Waters Fund, the only district really seeing an increase in overall appropriations is the Northwest Quadrant. And it's really not from their direct appropriations driving the increase. It's really the chargebacks to it from the Pure Waters Administration Cost Center. And that's based on work orders and a small increase in the charges from the Rochester district. And all those inter-districts charges are based on metered flow rates. So really, it's an indication that there's a lot of work being done in Northwest Quadrant. But rather than talk about appropriations, I think in this presentation it's more important to take note of two proposed rate changes. The first being in GCO, the Gates, Chi-Li, Ogden District. Some of you know or will remember the last rate increase for GCO was back in 2017. So for the 2021 budget, we are seeking a 9.1% increase. The estimated average impact per household of that is about $21. The other rate increase you'll find in Northwest Quadrant. Now, their last rate increase came in 2014. So for this proposed 2021 budget, we're seeking a 12.9% rate increase. That's a little steeper, but the average impact per household is a little less, $15.15. Now, each spring, Director Garland's team and I get together to review each of the district's finances, and each year it's GCO in Northwest Quadrant that we find to be struggling. As a GCO ratepayer myself, I'm not really excited about the prospect of a rate increase, but in all honesty, what I'm most interested is being able to flush my toilet and have everything just go away. So Director Garland and I are happy to follow up with you on any questions regarding this budget or the requested rate increases. So Mr. Vice Chairman, I thank you, and I will stop sharing my screen so we can get to questions and answers.
Yes, thank you, Mr.
Okay,
Franklin.
thank you very much, Mr. Franklin. I'm now going to open the floor to any committee members who have questions regarding the Environment and Public Works portion of the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman, and thank you, Mr.
Legislator
Franklin.
Brew.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman and Mr. Franklin, for the presentation, as always. My first set of questions actually are derived from some aviation department questions. And the first one, you may have heard this before through the chair to Mr. Franklin. Can you provide the legislator with a breakdown of all positions that fall under this position for the 2021 budget that are authorized, funded, and vacant? This breakdown should include each title and corresponding budgeted amounts for salary, retirement, Social Security contributions, medical insurance, and dental insurance. Please also indicate the fund, department, and cost centers charged for each corresponding position. Mr. Franklin, are you on the line?
My apologies, I didn't take myself off mute.
Oh.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman, for the question. Even though it may have been asked in prior committee meetings, I appreciate where the question's coming from, but We have received this request probably every year since I've been CFO. We've always been hesitant to release any reports, primarily because, given this county's turnover rate and our efforts to seek new hires, every time we generate a report, such as the one requested, it's essentially obsolete within a day. And I'm not really interested in sharing obsolete data for important decision-making. I firmly believe that this budget is outlined throughout each department and in the back with sufficient salary schedule detail and authorized position detail. I do suggest that the legislature has all the relevant information they need to make informed decisions on appropriations. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Okay. And thank you. We will move on to the next question, and through the chair to the administration, what percentage of the aviation department is mandated versus non-mandated?
Mr. Vice Chairman, I probably should have brought that with me tonight. My apologies. However, I will make sure that is included with the schedule of all departments, and we will make sure that is provided before the full legislature gets together on December.
Very good. Thank you. And through the chair to the administration, have any capital projects included in the 2025 capital improvement plan funded as part of the 2020 capital budget been delayed, downsized, or canceled as a result of appropriation restrictions imposed due to the county's financial position as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic? And if so, please provide the committee with a list of those affected projects and revised budgets and/or project timelines.
Mr. Vice Chairman, I am aware earlier in this year, the Finance Office pushed back on a lot of departments in their capital projects. I am unaware regarding Department of Aviation, any delays in projects that have not already been discussed. So I believe the answer is it's a long no, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Okay, thank you. And through the chair to the administration, what is the breakdown of the aviation budget as it relates to appropriations charged to the general fund, airport fund, debt service fund, and capital projects fund?
Well, Mr. Chairman, all the revenues and expenses of the Department of Aviation are accounted for within the enterprise fund, that is the Department of Aviation, and there are no charges to the general fund. There are no uses of appropriated fund balance. So I believe the answer would be like 0 on all counts.
Okay. Thank you. Another question through the chair. The county is projecting the airport fund to have a $216.9 million positive fund balance at the end of this year, with an 18.8 million of this being unrestricted. Through the chair, does the county have a strategy to use these funds in support of the airport?
So that's an interesting question, Mr. Vice Chairman. I say that because coincidentally, probably maybe a month ago or so, I reached out to Director Moore and the finance administrator for the Department of Aviation, and with an idea. They would like some time to think it over. They have to see how my idea would fit into their schedule of rates and charges with the airlines. So yes, there is an idea. I'm not going to call it a plan yet, and I think it's a little too early to discuss it in a public forum such as this. But there will be a plan soon, Mr. Vice Chairman.
I understand that. Thank you. Through the chair to the administration, one more question for now. Does the 2021 proposed budget allocate any cash capital for aviation department projects? And if so, why was the decision made to use cash capital instead of additional debt service?
No, Mr. Vice Chairman, within the Aviation Department, there are no cash capital projects.
Thank you. That's
Chairman.
all I have for the moment.
Legislator Mafucci? Hello?
Mute.
What?
Legislator, yeah, you're on mute.
Legislator Mafucci, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Through the chair to the administration, climate change is a pressing issue both globally and locally. Can you explain the administration's plans to better address this issue, highlighting specific steps the county will take to address the climate issues and take advantage of any economic development opportunities in that area?
Let me jump in. Through the chair, this is Mike Garland, Director of DES. As you know, from last year, your honorable body created or earlier this year, created the Climate Action Plan Advisory Committee. They've been very active and very diligent. This evening, in fact, we'll be considering a referral for the Climate Action Plan and having an engineer on board to advance phase 1 of the Climate Action Plan. In addition, your honorable body passed the Climate Smart Communities Pledge. So we are moving in the right direction. We're moving very quickly in that regard. As you know, the Climate Action Plan will be conducted in 2 phases. First phase, looking at county operations, what we control, and what we operate on a daily basis. Beyond that would be the second phase of the Climate Action Plan, and that would be looking at the community as a whole. And our goal ultimately is to really reduce our carbon footprint, and to get to that point, we need to measure our carbon footprint. That's something that's never been done. Many of you know that there's been a projects regarding sustainability that have been very advantageous towards climate action, but it's never been quantified in the sense of what is the overall benefit to the community in terms of greenhouse gas reduction and carbon footprint reduction. So I can attest that the advisory committee has been very active. We've been meeting on a monthly basis. We've had presentations from within and outside the county, and in my professional opinion, we're moving in the right direction, and we're doing that very quickly.
Thank you. I have a couple other questions through the chair to the administration. On page 113, I'll give you a second to go there. There are 5 projects listed for completion next. Do you anticipate the work at the county office building, Hall of Justice, Public Safety Building, and jail visitation to be completed? And if not, why not?
Through the chair, yes, I expect each of those projects to be completed. The county office building, window replacement and masonry restoration, we expect to have that completed in January by the end of the month. The Hall of Justice courtroom improvement project completed in the second quarter of 2021. Also, the Public Safety Building second and third floor renovation project in the second quarter. Jail visitation renovation project, we expect that to be completed in the third quarter.
Thank you. Through the chair to the administration, for the 5th project, the Seneca Park Zoo improvements, will the tabling by the Rec and Ed Committee of the license and operating agreement with the Seneca Park Zoo Society have any impact on that project? If so, what might complicate the completion of the improvements?
I think through you, Mr. Chairman, I know that Director Meredith and his Parks team are evaluating the scope of that project and the schedule for the project at the zoo. You know, given the capital allocation within the capital budget for that project, but that is something that I know that department's undertaking now.
Thank you. Through the chair of the administration, again on page 113, would you please explain the importance of the SAP Asset Management Program?
Certainly. As you know, through the chair, Mr. Chairman, county relies very, very heavily on the SAP accounting system, asset management system for daily operations, not only in DES, but certainly in Director Franklin's department for purchasing, procurement. So it's integral to daily county operations, but particularly for DES, we rely on it for work orders. So we're able to track labor and expense, and we've been doing this now for several years. There is a rollout of a new upgrade to the system, so we will continue to work with Director Kuzi and her department to advance that rollout of the next version of the SAP Asset Management System.
Thank you. Through the chair to Mr. Garland, what are you most pleased to see in this budget?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'm delighted to see that we have the $200,000 committed for advancing the climate action plan. While I don't like rate increases, we usually will, only ask for them when we need a rate increase, and we try to do it in a way that is manageable for the ratepayer. But in my discussions with Director Franklin, I think that rate increase is very important for our ability in Pure Waters to provide reliable and resilient service to its ratepayers.
Thank you, Mr. Garland, for your very professional responses. I have one final question. I have one final statement. I would just like to wish everybody a happy and safe Thanksgiving. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Legislator Dondorfer.
Legislator Dondorfer, you have the floor.
Thank you. Through the chair, can you provide to the administration, can you provide a breakdown of cellular telephone appropriations for the department? What devices are being issued to the department, mobile Wi-Fi access points or cellular phones, and the personal titles of all within the department who are issued cell phones and mobile Wi-Fi access points?
Mr. Vice Chairman, we are working on that request.
Okay. Thank you. And then through the chair to the administration, can you provide a breakdown of travel appropriations for each division within the aviation department? What travel is planned? What conferences are being scheduled to be attending?
Mr. Chairman, excuse me, Mr. Vice Chairman, we are working on that request.
Thank you.
Yes, this is Legislator Brew. I have a couple of questions in regard to revenue. On page 678, revenues, airport administration, federal aid that stood at $3,678 in 2019 and $0 in 2020, amended as budgeted in 2020 for $8 million. Through the chair, can you explain this change? And I stand corrected on that first number. That would have been $3,676,000 and $0 in 220, and then the amendment for 2021 was $8 million. So through the
my
chair.
apologies, Mr. Vice Chair. Can I have that page number reference one more time, please?
Yes, on page 678.
Federal aid, account 403000. Mr. Vice Chairman, I can't really explain what the $3,000 entry is in 2019. I can tell you, Mr. Vice Chairman, the $8 million requested for 2021 is really a carryover of CARES Act funding provided by the FAA to our airport. That money has to be used over a greater span of time than $129 million the county itself received, but that is reflective of the balance of their funding.
Oh, okay. And I understand that $8 million that was appropriated through the CARES Act funding can certainly be used to offset revenue losses. Is that correct?
It is correct, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Yes. Another question, again, through the chair, on page 678, revenues, airport administration. I don't believe we have ever received this until this year. Through the chair, is this a new change or is this a new sharing agreement between the county and the airport?
I'm sorry, for which line, Mr. Vice Chairman?
On page 678 again.
Speaking about federal aid, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sort of a follow-up, somewhat of a follow-up question to the previous question.
Oh, it has, this 2020 was the first time of this particular funding award through the FAA, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Okay. Thank you. Another question I have is the regarding personnel and the amount of personnel employed at the airport. On page 704, aviation personnel have remained unchanged, same as the previous years. And through the chair, in light of the ongoing global pandemic, with event cancellations and travel adversaries all across the world, thus resulting in dramatically reduced air travel, is this in line with other airports' response to COVID?
Mr. Vice Chairman, as I kind of alluded to in my presentation, whether there are 100 flights or 10 flights a day, we still have to provide a base level of service to keep the runways open, the firefighters on duty. I do believe, however, Director Andy Moore is on the line if he would like to respond relative to other airports.
Yes, through the chairman, this is Andy Moore, Director of Aviation for Rochester. The answer to your question is yes. I'm in constant contact with the airport directors in Albany, Syracuse, Buffalo, Ithaca, and so forth. And to date, there have been no layoffs or furloughs at any of those airports. So we are consistent with what other airports have been doing throughout 2020. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Moore. That's all the questions I have for the time being.
Okay.
Legislator Don Dorfer.
Legislator Don Dorfer.
Thank you. I have some general fund questions I'd like to ask through the chair to the administration. How much, if any, of the general fund balance is being applied to the environmental service budget? And if the general fund balance is being applied, what is the breakdown of restricted versus unrestricted applied fund balances?
Mr. Vice Chairman, there is no general fund appropriation of fund balance for environmental services.
Great, thank you. My next question has been asked by Legislator Mafucci already. Great minds must think alike. So I'll skip on through the chair to the administration. What is the breakdown of environmental services as it relates to the appropriations charged to the general funds, solid waste fund, pure waters fund, debt services fund, and the capital projects fund?
Mr. Vice Chairman, real quick, there are no charges to a capital fund. Engineering, the Division of Engineering is a general fund charge. Our facilities management is a internal services fund charge. Our pure waters districts, including the admin, the GIS lab, our pure waters district fund charges, our solid waste operations, our solid waste fund charges. That's it. That is it, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Great, thank you. And through the chair to the administration, does the 2021 proposed budget allocate any cash capital for environmental service projects? And if so, why was the decision made to use cash capital instead of additional debt services?
Yes, Mr. Vice Chairman, in a couple areas. Our engineering and facilities management includes a provision for capital projects of $150,000. This is really for the refresh and replacement of Monroe County's security infrastructure. It could be card readers, cameras, and the software that makes all of that work. This was a legacy cost from the former M3S LDC. When the LDC was merged back into Monroe County operations, we made a commitment at that time and have continued it since to fund the security costs within engineering and facilities management operations to the tune of $150,000. We made that commitment for two major reasons. One of the reasons for creating the LDC to begin with was continual frustration of the public safety director at that time and his predecessor in constantly battling with the budget office for funding to replace critical security and access systems. Rather than continue to beat his head against the wall, both on an operating budget level and a capital budget level, there was the idea to create an LDC that could manage all of that independent of county administration and the county legislature. To avoid a situation being created like that again, where department heads seek to go around the administration for their critical needs, we made a personal and professional commitment to keep this line item in here. The prior administration upheld that commitment, and the current administration continues to uphold that commitment. The second major reason why we are funding with cash capital is that the commitment was for an annual funding of $150,000 per year. For capital projects that are annually recurring of the same dollar amount or roughly the same dollar amount, it makes much better financial sense to fund those projects with cash, because it only takes between 7 and 8 years until the annual debt service on such projects exceed the annual funding plan because of the associated bond issuance cost and the associated interest on debt service. This particular project, being that it is security access control systems, is quite driven by information systems, computer controls, computer network systems, computer information systems. Technology evolves quite rapidly. It's not unheard of for computer system technology to evolve within 3 years. The period of probable usefulness for this type of equipment is 5 years. If we were to bond for this capital project, we would be likely borrowing for 5 years for technology that may be obsolete in only 3 years. So those are the two major reasons for this particular capital line item. Within the Pure Waters Fund, each of the Pure Waters districts has its own cash capital funded project for general collection systems improvements. They are of varying dollar amounts between the districts, but within each district, the capital project funding is the same. So, Mr. Vice Chairman, rather than repeat myself, again, we have a situation where these capital projects are annually recurring of the same dollar amount, and by converting these over to cash capital, and actually Director Garland and I, and at the time, Deputy Director Jason Kennedy, worked for about a year to map out the spending, because there were dollars rolling forward in prior approvals that we actually zeroed out the capital project for 2 years, maybe 1 year in Rochester, but 2 years in the other districts. And that bought enough cushion of time to bring down the annual debt service that it wasn't quite a hit on their budget to now put in this cash capital funding. So that's the explanation there, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Great, thank you very much. And through the chair to the administration, what percentage of the department's budget is mandated versus non-mandated?
Mr. Vice Chairman, again, I should have brought that information with me tonight. I did not, but we will make sure that information is when we report mandated costs of the other departments.
Okay, thank you. Through the chair to the administration, what is the solid waste fund's current net position, and what steps are being taken to reduce the deficit?
Mr. Vice Chairman, I did not bring the 2019 CAFR with me, but if I can go off memory, the net deficit position is around $19 or $20 million. I'm getting a nod here. The plan to turn around that net deficit position has been ongoing since 2015. We are at the point where for the past 5 years, solid waste has generated operating income of $500,000 a year. Occasionally, it's been a little higher, plus or minus a few dollars. But as I believe I noted, if that's the way we're going to keep moving forward, it'll take about 30, 35 years to dig ourselves out of that hole. Rather than have that kind of financial drain on the county's overall credit, we have included in the 2020 budget and the 2021 budget, and it's my intent to do this each year, to request $2 million of net county support for the solid waste fund. This would allow the solid waste fund to generate annual favorable returns in excess of the $500,000 that it would have generated by itself. Hopefully, it will generate returns closer to that $2 million mark, if not 2.5, and we can dig our way out of this hole within 10 years instead of 35. At such time, we could discontinue that general fund subsidy. And I think that that would be another good move, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Great. Sounds good too. And final question for now is through the chair to the administration. This legislature authorized a $2.5 million contribution from the general fund to the solid waste fund via the 2020 budget. And through the chair, was this transfer made? And if not, what was the net impact of the deficit?
Mr. Chairman, within 2020, that transfer has been made, yes. I believe it was made around the same time, late October, early November, when all the cash capital transfers were made.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a couple questions for CFO Franklin. On page 557, appropriations, environmental services, solid waste administration, utilities and electric were $371,000 in 2019 actual and $0 in 2020 amended and budgeted for 2021. Can you explain the reason for the decline?
It looks like great savings, Mr. Vice Chairman, but it's not actually, unfortunately. This electric relates to, we have an 11 megawatt solar array split between Gloria Drive and the Northwest Quadrant. In 2019, the utilities associated there were included in the Solid Waste Administration. We've actually moved those to facilities. Basically, that's to get the expense for the electricity in the same fund as the RG&E bills that come. Because the way it works, we get a credit for the solar energy produced on the RG&E statement. So rather than have a lot of expense and then chargebacks going back and forth, we married up the expense with the revenue.
Okay, thank you. Then again on page 557, appropriations, environmental services, solid waste administration, commercial services, this line is increasing. What commercial services are we using, and what is accounting for the increase?
This really, Mr. Vice Chair, relates to an increase associated with hauling the sludge from our wastewater treatment facilities. I'm sorry, that's leachate hauling, not sludge hauling, sorry. This is hauling leachate from Gloria Drive over to Millseat Landfill. they will get offsetting revenue for that as well, but you're only seeing the appropriations here.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Vice Chair, I'm also told we also have some recycling education commercial services in this line too. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. On page 559, transfer hall landfill, who are the recipients of the public works contracts and solid waste transfer contracts?
The Public Works contracts, Mr. Vice Chair, that's really our contract with Cascades Recovery, and it reimburses them for their operating and maintenance costs.
Okay, thank you.
Legislator Udelson?
Yes, legislator, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. I wanted to, through the chair, first echo Mr. Garland's sentiments of being pleased to see the appropriations for the Climate Action Plan. As you know, I co-chair the advisory committee, and I'm joined there by yourself, Vice Chair Ansello, as well as Legislator Boyce. We really appreciate all the efforts of Mr. Garland and his department, and looking forward to the recommendation to the legislature next year. My question through the chair to Mr. Franklin is from the list of questions that have been read at pretty much every committee meeting this week. There was one asked of you earlier about vacant positions, and you explained why you would decline, to provide that information. And what I wanted to clarify was just that that was also your position in previous budget years during previous administrations.
It was, Mr. Vice Chair.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Legislator Marionetti?
Legislator Marionetti, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you. Just a few questions through the chair. I'm on page 560. Appropriations for Mill Seat landfill, similar to one of the last questions. Who are the recipient or recipients of the public work contracts under that line item?
One moment, Mr. Vice Chair, please. I'm sorry, Mr. Vice Chair. I heard 550. I guess we're on page 560. Sorry about that.
560, correct, through the chair.
Our public works contracts, Mr. Vice Chair, those are really our host agreements with the towns of Riga, Bergen, also Bergen Schools, and the Bergen Fire District. This is the appropriation to pay those host agreements.
Okay, thank you. Also through the chair, now on page 562. Appropriations for buildings maintenance went from 5,000 in 2020 to now 577,000. Can you just explain that increase?
Yes, Mr. Vice Chairman. This is an appropriation to catch up on a number. It's really deferred maintenance. Actually, I think I had mentioned this in my presentation. There are a number of deferred maintenance projects at the recycling center, including the installation of catch basin hoods. That's really for stormwater control and site drainage. And then a couple building improvements related to the damaged exterior metal siding. We have to repave. That's been needed for quite some time. Over at the refuse recovery facility, again, similar installation of catch basins for stormwater control. They also need paving. We've taken a lot of tires, Mr. Vice Chair. We have a tire stockpile shelter holding tank and associated sanitary piping and new concrete pavement for the loading docks. This, I think my comment was, appropriations for solid wastes are up, but I kind of categorize these as a one-time cost. That doesn't mean there's going to be different one-time costs next year, but it made me feel better.
Understood. Also through the chair, now on page 563, DES Engineering Administration appropriations for professional services. That's up by, I believe, 200,000. If you could explain that increase.
This is 200,000?
Yeah, 200,000.
Mr. Vice Chair, this relates to an appropriation for our Climate Action Plan consulting selection.
Great. Okay, thank you. Through the chair, now on page 575. That's appropriations for telephone. That's going from 3,100 to 35,100. If you could explain that increase?
Yes, Mr. Vice Chair, you're supposed to ask that question. This $35,000 really is the charge for, we have about 90 lines for fire and security alarm systems. Yeah, the appropriation in 2020 should be 31,000, not 3,100. That was a budgeting error a year ago.
Okay, thank you. Through the chair, lastly, I have this two questions are similar to ask for the Department of Aviation, just a breakdown of cellular telephone appropriations as well as travel appropriations for DES through the chair.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we will include that in our project. Thank you.
Thank you. And just through the chair, I also would just like to thank Mr. Franklin for his responses and his work to this point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Legislator Brew. Legislator Brew, you might be on mute.
Okay, I didn't expect all of you to read lips, so how am I doing now? Okay. Before I get on to my next set of questions, I'd like to commend Director Garland and Waste Management regarding solid waste operations that my town hosts out here in Riga. I am a member of the Citizens Advisory Board. I've been attending those meetings now since I became a member of the legislation, and Director Garland is very responsive to any questions that come up, any concerns. Waste Management is always on top of things. They run a fine operation out there, and I would just like to provide some positive feedback in terms of Director Garland and his management team out there that does oversee solid waste, as well as our partner, Waste Management. The only complaint I have is that the transfer trucks traveling down 490, they seem to have sort of a hot foot at times, right? And those would likely be contractors. So I would love it if we could put governors on all of those big rigs to not allow them to go over 65 miles an hour, because some of them really fly. And I would think that that might put the county in somewhat of a potential, some liability, but I know that every chance I get, I always try to make that point that we've got to remind our transfer drivers of taking proper safety driving precautions. So with that, let me get on to my questions, if I may. On page 709, Department of Environmental Services, DES personnel, through the chair, can you explain why construction specialist 1 position was eliminated from 20 to 2021?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. One moment, please, though. Sorry, Mr. Chair. Sorry, Mr. Vice Chairman. Yes, we did eliminate that position from the Department of Environmental Services. It's not entirely going away, however. It's being transferred over to the newly created Department of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Again, on page 709 through the chair, can you explain why environmental planner 1 position was eliminated as well?
Through Mr. Director Garland will take this question, Mr. Vice Chairman. Sorry.
Through you, Mr. Vice Chairman, in evaluating the department's needs, we've proposed abolishing and creating a new title from that. We didn't have a specific need for that position, and where we had a greater need was creating a second code enforcement officer in that, and felt that was a higher priority. So you'll see that there is a second code enforcement officer created in our budget.
Okay. Thank you, Director Garland. And through the administration, I have a couple similar questions for some other personnel positions. Again, on page 709 through the chair, can you explain why contractual services liaison DES 1 position was eliminated?
Mr. Vice Chairman, we know that position changed. We just need to research that a little bit, and we will respond to you accordingly.
That would be fine. Thank you. And again, on page 709 through the chair, can you explain why senior drafting technician 1 position was eliminated from the budget?
Mr. Vice Chairman, that there was an old change. The budget is catching up, but nonetheless, we'll respond with an explanation behind that.
Okay. Another similar question, if I could, through the chair. Can you explain the need for the addition of a junior engineer position?
Yeah, so
Mr. Vice Chairman, this is another situation where the position actually changed last year, but again, we will follow up the rationale behind that accordingly.
Okay, and thank you very much. And I had a couple other questions that I just jotted down during our previous discussion. I think Legislator Udelson had actually provided some questions regarding some renewable resources and the electricity and the budget amounts that we were seeing. My question is, through the entire Monroe County enterprise, do we know how much of our purchased electricity is provided by green or renewable energy resources? Is that something that we track? Is that something that we may have a handle on?
Yeah, there's RECs associated with that.
Okay.
I don't have a number. We could get that.
Monroe County does have, I think you all know already, an energy aggregation group for a whole bunch of municipalities in the county. They, I believe, have a way of mathematically determining what portion of our electricity comes from green energy. Really, it's the certificates that get purchased. So we'll have to consult with our energy aggregation group provider, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Franklin. And a follow-up question. So is there a plan going forward in the coming years to look at the present purchasing numbers of whatever that percentage might be and to increase the amount that might be purchased through renewable resources? I'd just like to know a little bit more about, what the county is doing in terms of that.
A very interesting question, Mr. Vice Chairman. One that I think a number of people have been asking, what should we do or should not do? That actually is going to be one of the components of the consulting firm that is assisting with the Climate Action Plan.
Okay, thank you. A couple other questions to the chair. Dropping back to aviation, is there still a combined heat and power plant, cogen plant in operation out at the airport?
Mr. Vice Chair, if I can defer to Director Andy Moore.
Through the chair, the cogen has been dismantled. It is not currently in operation.
Okay, thank you. And another question to the director of the airport, if I may. There was an effort, actually, there was a legislative approval of an automated parking system for the parking garage out there not too long ago. And my question was, is that project going forward? Has that been paused? Has that been canceled? Or what is the status of that project, Mr. Director?
Sure. Through the chairman, that was a state grant that the airport was awarded last year. That project is on pause currently due to COVID-19 and cost reduction initiatives. We have worked with the State Department of Transportation, which issued the grant, and they have given us, along with all the other airports that received grants for the state last year, a year to maybe 2 years to do the project. So it is on hold right now.
Thank you, Mr. Director. That's all the questions I had for this time being. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Legislator Dondorfer, did you have a question?
I do. I have two more questions. I promise they'll be brief. Through the chair to the administration, do we have the total number of vehicles in the county fleet, and whether that's increasing or decreasing? I don't need to know the numbers, just is it going up or down?
Okay, Mr. Vice Chairman, we'll follow up on that. No problem.
Right, it's under our fleet. It's under our fleet performance measures.
Oh, Mr. Vice Chair,
Answer that.
I believe we already provide that answer in the budget book.
Yeah, let's see. Give me 1 second.
We're just flipping to the correct page.
Let's see. You get that? No, the performance measures under it. Give me 1 second.
Apply.
Okay, getting there.
I think we have the green fleet.
I know, I can't believe that.
Okay,
here we go.
I hear a rumor it went up 5.
Through you, Mr. Vice Chairman, page 134 of the budget book, Environmental Services Division Fleet Maintenance, you'll see that we have a breakdown of the vehicles. These do not include sheriff's vehicles. These are all other vehicles in the county, broken down by light, medium, and heavy duty usage, and with a total of estimated in 2021 to be 975 vehicles.
Thank you, and thank you, Legislator Baroth, for stepping up on that one. Last question through the chair to the administration. Can this committee be provided a list of all county take-home vehicles and the personal titles associated with those vehicles?
Through you, Mr. Vice Chairman, yes, we can.
Thank you.
Is there any further discussion?
Legislator Barworth?
Legislator, you have the floor.
Thank you. First, I just want to say thank you for everyone for being here. I mean, this is Thanksgiving Eve, and here we are in what I consider to be one of the best, committees, in the county. And I'm really annoyed that there's only like 22 people online right now. On the other committee meetings, there's like 40, 46. We only get 22. I'd like to make an amendment at some point that we actually put some funds to the communications department to up the, publicity level for this committee. It deserves it. So with that to start.
Look at that.
We just deserve it. And I do also want to say that working with Director Garland has been a joy, and I don't say that lightly. He has always been responsive under the previous administrations, not just one, but two, and the current administration. It's always been good working with him, and I just got to say, if you have a question, he will answer it, and he will answer it as accurately as possible, so it's always much appreciated. Don't worry about it, it's okay. So I have quite a few questions, but quite a few less questions than normal, simply because some other people have been asking lots of questions, and a lot of my questions were asked already, and so that's just great. I won't repeat. So my first question, it comes from the presentation that Mr. Franklin did, and we talked about the deferred maintenance in the solid waste division that accounted for approximately $575,000 worth of the increase in the appropriations. How long have those projects been deferred? Do we know anywhere from 1 year to 10 years, couple years, months? What's the delay on these maintenance or needs, such as the pavements and the shingles?
Through you, Mr. Vice Chairman, thank you for the compliments. I would estimate that it's been about 5 years that we've been assessing these needs primarily on site. The building sustained some wind damage as well too during those more recent storms. So I would estimate 5 years.
Okay, fair enough. And in those 5 years, I'm assuming that this had no real impact on our services or anything we did. They were all relatively, call it, cosmetic in nature?
Through you, Mr. Vice Chairman, they're critical to the infrastructure as well as managing stormwater on site. So it has not had an impact on the operation, but it's critical to the infrastructure of the site and the facility.
Because sooner or later, if you have potholes that go into bigger potholes, the problem just escalates, correct?
Through you, Mr. Vice Chairman, that's correct.
Okay. In addition, through the chair, you mentioned that I forget the name for it, but there's a tire storage facility. And that brought to mind, do we in fact just store them, or do we have a method of recycling them, through the chair?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chairman, Cascades Recovery handles those tires for various uses. They can strip metal out of them. They can use the rubber for other type of purposes, but they're under contract to manage those. And those are tires that come to the resource recovery facility from the City of Rochester under our long-term intermunicipal agreement with the City of Rochester. So they're collected by city trucks and brought to the transfer station.
But just to be sure, while we collect them, we also dispose of them as well. So we're not overflowing, correct?
Oh, through Mr. Vice Chairman, that is correct. Yep.
Okay, thank you. In terms of the fleet maintenance appropriations, that's on page 578. I had a question about that. That wasn't addressed earlier. Give me a second to get there.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now on 578, the lines for supplies were both diesel fuel and gasoline. There was essentially a spike in the expenses in 2020 amended. And my question is, what was that due to, this spike in cost for both those fuels? Was that related to differences in usage, or is that related to the cost of the fuel? And if it helps, I can tell you where I'm going with this.
We're just making sure we have all our ducks in a row here, Mr. Chairman, but Mr. Garland.
Through Mr. Vice Chairman, we pay for the cost of the fuel for Cascades to haul the trash from the RRF. So that was an increase in that particular year where we were paying directly for that.
Mm-hmm.
So we have seen the consumption go up, but also in our current year, we're seeing the rate of fuel, cost of fuel going down. So there's really two variables that we see any year. It's either consumption or the rates that can influence what you see in our budget.
Okay, through the chair, but the money we transfer to Cascade, wouldn't that all be diesel?
Yeah, that was the diesel line.
That's why I went down.
Yeah,
Right.
your fuel line.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So the fuel line, we're talking about diesel, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I got.
Through you, Mr. Vice Chairman, yes, that's diesel that is used for the transfer haul at the RRF. We have seen the consumption go up on that, but the rate go down, and we're seeing that cost go down. Whereas other fuel and gasoline, we've seen the rate go up. in prior years. Again, that's coming down now as well, too.
I guess I'm getting at, the reasoning behind this is I understand that, Cascade, there's a spike in price, that'll explain the increase in the diesel line, but in the fuel line for fuel and gasoline, I would imagine that it's just not for, that's for all of the fleet, including, for example, regular cars. And my understanding is that we're dispersing fewer of those. I was wondering if that was having a budgetary impact on the gasoline line.
So through you, Mr. Vice Chairman, I'll review the three fuel lines. Again, we have diesel, we have a propane line, as well as a gasoline line. And so we have used different fuels in the fuel line, and we're likely using more in prior years. So we shift the need where we see we're getting the best performance and the best economy. Mm-hmm. We're seeing a decrease in propane primarily due to the rate of propane. So it was 92,000 in 2020. It's 85,000 now in 2021. So we're seeing a reduction there. We are estimating, though, in the same consumption, it's just a reduction in the rate.
Okay.
And that's what's also driving down the cost for both gasoline as well as the reduction in diesel.
Okay.
It's all rate driven.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you so much. I was looking at the diesel versus gasoline, I was not confused, but extremely interested. So thank you for the answer. Moving on, I want to move to page 112. And that's environmental services, and that's the objectives and accomplishments. And I had a question about one of the accomplishments for Pure Waters, and that was the execute a project labor agreement for the aeration and clarifier improvement projects. Can you describe how well or how well not did the project labor agreement go?
Through you, Mr. Vice Chairman, as you know, your honorable body approved that project labor agreement. That will be incorporated into 3 capital projects at Van Lair. They will be bid out next year. So we have not implemented the project labor agreement. These are multi-year, multi-phase projects. So that project labor agreement will be in place throughout the duration of the construction phase of those projects.
But they have not yet been agreed to, through the chair?
Excuse me. No, through you, Mr. Vice Chairman, that has been signed off by all members of the trades unions.
Okay, and that was a process that you're satisfied with, correct, through the chair?
Through you, Mr. Vice Chairman, yes.
Okay, thank you. And there's another major objective for 2021. I know it's been on the planning books for a little while now, but what is the intent behind the last solid waste management proposal to revise the solid waste reuse and recycling law? What's the goal of that through the chair?
Through you, Mr. Vice Chairman, the solid waste and recycling law is outdated. It hasn't been updated in several years, I think since the beginning of the program itself. We have looked at it very carefully. We were attempting to move that forward over the last couple of years, but the market was changing, as we know. We also want to get input from the Climate Action Plan next year as well, too, to better inform how we approach the law, the solid waste and recycling law. It presently is not impacting our program. Our program is obviously far advanced from that prior law, but it's one that we have on our agenda to move forward next year.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, on the same page, I know that we've improved dramatically over the last 2-3 years, but in terms of the Pure Water's last goal, which is to continue to comply with all the state and federal regulations regarding the effluent removal standards and such, how are we doing this year to date, through the chair?
Through you, Mr. Vice Chairman, at our Northwest Quadrant, plant, we have not had any violations this year. And we're happy about that. At Van Laer, we had a period of 366 days where we had no excursions, no permit excursions or violations. Again, very happy about that. So far in 2020, we've only had 3 permit violations. And they were, I would say, relatively small in terms of the exceedances. So again, you know, it's based on normal operations. One would expect that you will have an occasional violation. Nothing like we experienced certainly in 2015, 16, and 2017. So we've made great strides since that time to really bring the plant back into compliance.
Okay, thank you. I was imagining that was the answer, but it's nice to hear the confirmation. Thank you. On page 115, so solid waste management appropriations. I know from the presentation by Mr. Franklin that the tipping fee decrease, which I was going to ask about, was partly, if not entirely, by design and in order to allow for transfer funds from the Monroe County. I get that. The sale of energy increased even more. What's behind that increase in sale of energy?
Mr. Vice Chair, really the main driver of that revenue increase is the rate we are receiving for the green energy produced at Millstate Landfill, our gas to energy plant. That rate had been on average $31.98. We're trending upwards, and the budget for 21 is up to $40.78. So it's really market rate driven.
Nice, that's great. So then I guess what that means is the actual output hasn't really changed dramatically. It's all rate.
Correct, Mr. Vice Chair.
Okay, thank you. Let's hope that continues. All right, moving on. Some of them were already asked, and I don't want to repeat. If we could go to page 117, I just want to confirm that the appropriated fund balance, which goes up by about $700,000, is that part of the transfer, the $2 million transfer from the county?
No, Mr. Vice Chairman, and I did not reference this particular one. Somebody asked about general fund appropriated fund balance. This is actually from our debt service fund, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Oh, okay.
It's specifically the reserve for bonded debt, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Okay, then I misunderstood that one. Thank you for clarifying. I did want to ask, I know you mentioned...
Mr. Vice Chairman, and it's also a $1 million, I think I mentioned this in my presentation, within facilities, our building accounts, our plan is to appropriate $1 million of the unrestricted portion of the facilities fund balance. So that plus a reserve for bonded debt is what you see on this page.
Okay.
So the facilities is in our internal service fund. Reserve for bonded debt comes from our debt service fund.
Okay. I conflated the two in my mind, actually, to be honest. Okay, thank you very much. Shifting gears a little bit to page 121, and I know you mentioned this in the presentation about the change in rates to Gage, Chi-Li, and Northwest quadrants, and that the increase is going to be approximately $15 or $21 per household. I understand that. In the past, as you know, I've asked many questions about the Pure Waters District, perhaps ad nauseum, but it's kind of stinky business. Okay, I got my obligatory laugh. Thank you. But I was told on a number of occasions that while we anticipate these rate increases as a quote worst case scenario, that those rate increases do not always, if ever, actually occur. Is that not the case with these two districts?
Actually, Mr. Vice Chair, well, maybe I'm mistaken, and you can correct me if you believe I'm wrong, but when we have made that comment, those comments, in my recollection, pertain to I&Is, or increase in improvements. We are required by the state comptroller to include a mathematical estimate of what that I&I may have on our rates. But because of the way we approach our debt service, and there are other efficiencies and reductions in maintenance costs, very often they have no impact truly on the rates.
Okay, for the INIs.
To the best of my recollection, that is when we have made that.
That sounds correct. I think you are correct about that. And so I guess my only other question I'll ask then regarding this is, you mentioned the last times these rates were changed for Gates and for Northwest. What was the last time Irondequoit Bay or Rochester's rates were changed?
Oh, we have that.
Yeah, I got that. 2014. Through Mr. Vice Chairman, 2014 for Irondequoit, Bay South Central District, and
I think you went mute.
I'm sorry.
yes,
We had to just check a fact real quick.
145 in 2014.
yeah. So yeah, right here. 215. Yep, 2014 in Irondequoit. And through you, Mr. Vice Chairman, the last time we had a rate increase in the city of Rochester was in 2006.
Thank you. So that leaves my next question. Speaking as a resident of Rochester, what's the likelihood of us seeing a rate increase in the Rochester district anytime soon?
Can we have just one moment, Mr. Vice Chair? All right, some good news, Mr. Vice Chair.
Through Mr. Vice Chairman, we're not expecting, not planning for a rate increase. If there are regulatory changes that could drive capital projects that could increase debt, that would be a potential driver for us to take a hard look at a rate increase. But again, if we have debt that's falling off, that may not necessarily translate into a rate increase. But I can tell you that district has been stable for several years now, and we don't expect that to change, at least for the foreseeable future.
Okay. Well, this is probably something we want to revisit later on, because as you know from our previous conversations, the rate increased dramatically for those massive public works projects that ended back in 1990 something or other, and we had discussed rates back then. So maybe we'll readdress these rates later on. Although given this is my last year, maybe I won't be involved in that conversation after all. That's a terrible realization when I think about that. But anyhow, so I want to move forward. Thank you for the explanation. I do appreciate that. I appreciate the rate increase in the INI requirement, and I would like the explanation. If you could go to page 122, please. Page 122, under supplies and where is it? I want to get it right. Supplies and materials. It's declining by about $1 million in 2021, but it's actually a spike because that's about where it was back in 2019, approximately. So what was the reason behind the increase in the amended budget amount back in for the supplies and materials there? It went up $1 million, now it's going back down $1 million.
Exactly what it was. Okay.
Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Vice Chairman, there was a cost spike for our chemicals. As you know, we rely very, very heavily on chemicals for our treatment process, but those rates are now coming down. So that's why you're seeing a reduction.
Just writing that down. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And that's just a great answer in the sense that hopefully, it won't happen again. If you go to the next page, 123 for industrial waste and laboratory, under asset equipment, it's jumping up, pretty significantly. I'm sure we're buying something, but what are we getting that explains it? It's like an $89,000 increase.
I got it. Hold on 1 second here. What's this here? All right. Through Mr. Vice Chairman, I I can get into some real specifics here. How about an insulated high voltage tool set? That'd be nice for Christmas. Bandsaw, and other mechanical equipment, pickups, vans, specialized equipment. Oh, I love this. Commercial grade snow blower.
Lend that out.
Yep. And we have sample refrigerators, not kegerators, sample refrigerators for things that we, for the laboratory, as well as a spectrophotometer and a BOD meter.
So then I guess the answer then is you're just buying a bunch of equipment that we need, correct, through the chair?
Exactly right, yep.
Okay. Is this replacing equipment that has worn out, or is this getting new things through the chair?
Based on my review of what we're looking at, this is primarily replacement of equipment. In some cases where we may need more sampling points, which is likely driving the sample refrigerators.
Okay, and then through the chair of the administration, given that's the case, then am I correct to assume that this is probably going to go down, all things being equal, in the next budget proposal?
Through Mr. Vice Chairman, I couldn't say that because I think we will have needs as each year progresses. We just try to be measured in our requests.
I will be on your side in that regard.
Okay, fair enough, thank you. On page 125, under the performance measures for the GIS systems, I did want to say that I'm really happy to see the increase in the number of GIS installs. That's great. But is there a driver behind this dramatic increase? Because if you go back in time, this really is a significant increase.
Yep, through you, Mr. Vice Chairman, we're probably a little overzealous back when we submitted this. And not because people aren't utilizing it, it's because we're really pushing people more towards web-based applications rather than having to physically install software on computers. Mm-hmm. So you're right, there is a high demand for this, across county operations, but that's probably a little bit on the high side. But please know that our web-based technology is providing a great benefit for users.
Okay, fair enough. So that might go down some.
Yes.
Okay. And the next two questions, and in fact, they're my last two questions, I always say that, hopefully it's my last two questions, has to do with kind of like, it's more like a broad question. I've noticed, and I don't want to go department by department, but I've noticed in the different Pure Waters districts under the interdepartmental charges line, they've been going up significantly, like 17%, 25%. What's driving that increase in those interdepartmental charges?
Interdepartmental charge is based on work order systems.
Yeah. Specifically within Pure Waters, Mr. Vice Chairman?
Specifically, Pure Waters Northwest District and Pure Waters Irondequoit came to mind. And maybe that has to do with the increase in rates, I don't know.
Oh, okay, through you, Mr. Vice Chairman, we bill back on actual work performed, and we have a better handle on actuals through the SAP asset management system that Legislator Mafucci had asked about earlier. Mm-hmm. So while we may have more work in a particular district one year and less in another year, the good news is that we've got a system that can really track labor, materials, and equipment used to be able to perform that maintenance.
Okay, fair enough. And my last question, and this, I'll be honest, this one bothered me. And I'm sure there's a reason for it. But when I looked at the performance measures, and I never really noticed this in the past, I always look to see where they're going up, where they're going down. But if you look for the commodity indicators, cost per millions of gallons, for example, they have electrical and natural gas and polymer, et cetera. Okay? Where they're the same across the Pure Water districts, the prices have nothing to do with each other. So, for example, the electrical charge for one is $41.11, and for another, it's $52.72, and they all vary dramatically. Is there a reason for this?
Through Mr. Vice Chairman, we use a 3-year average for our estimates. And this has been in the budget book for many, many years. It's just the way that we've presented these parameters. So it may not directly reflect what's happening in the budget book for a particular line item. It's just looking at historical expenditures and looking at it from a 3-year average standpoint.
Well, through the chair, that holds true for estimates, but I'm talking about the actuals.
I think, Mr. Vice Chair, however, it's not just simply a cost of electricity. It would be the cost of electricity per million gallons of flow. So there is a base amount of electricity that is used in a water treatment plant regardless of the flow. For example, even in the Rochester district, in high water weather events, we actually stock that water in our deep rock tunnel system, so that water is processed over multiple number of days. So the millions of gallons really is sitting in that denominator, and the cost of electricity doesn't change as dramatically in the numerator as the gallons do in the denominator, causing significant shifts in this this particular mathematical derivation.
Okay, that makes sense, actually, and I appreciate that. And I feel much better about it because, I guess not every district is created equally, and that makes sense. They don't do the same level of volume. But does that logic hold true for the other commodities as well, through the chair?
Through you, Mr. Vice Chairman, yes, both for Van Laer as well as Northwest Quadrant. That is correct.
Okay. It's always interesting stuff. You always learn new things. Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Once again, Mr. Franklin, thank you for a good presentation and great answers. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Should I say I yield the floor?
Seeing
Mr. Chair?
no more questions.
I'm done with questions. They're not moving. I think they're frozen. Oh, now they're moving.
Any further discussion? Okay. I'd like to thank CFO Franklin for all his answers tonight, and thank you very much. We'll move on. Okay. Next item on the agenda is approval of minutes. You have the February 26th, 2020 minutes of the Environment and Public Works Committee before you. They will stand approved unless the clerk is notified of any changes by the end of the day. The next item on the agenda is new business.
Referral 20-0374, authorized contracts to CHA Consulting, Inc., McFarland Johnson, Inc., and Pastoral Associates Engineering, Architecture, and Surveying, DPC, for airport consultant services for the Greater Rochester International Airport.
Moved by legislator Dondorfer, seconded by legislator Brew. Is there any discussion?
Legislator Dondorfer?
Yes.
Through the chair, is this the first time the county has contracted with McFarland Johnson Incorporated?
Through the Vice Chair, yes.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The item carries. Next item, please.
Referral 20-0376, authorized contracts with Barton LaJudas, DPC, Erdman Anthony and Associates, Inc., and Pastoral Associates Engineering, Architecture, and Surveying, PC, for architectural and engineering term services.
Moved by legislator Brew, seconded by legislator Marionetti. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? The item passes. Next item, please.
Referral 20-0377, authorized contracts with Atlantic Testing Laboratories Limited and Terracon Consultants, New York, Inc., for materials testing term services.
Moved by legislator Marionetti, seconded by legislator Dondorfer. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 The item passes. Next item.
Referral 20-0379, authorize a contract with Paradigm Environmental Services for professional environmental term services.
Moved by legislator Dondorfer, seconded by legislator Brew. Any discussion? Legislator Baroff, you have the floor.
Thank you, sir. Through you to the administration, Am I correct to assume that the services provided by Paradigm will only be for county-owned buildings?
Facilities. Through you, Mr. Vice Chairman, we do some work in the lab supporting other agencies in the community. The state has a facility in Hamlin. They have a facility in Letchworth. There's also the former King's Landing where we do some lab work. It's not a significant amount. We may rely on Paradigm for certain tests for that, but it would be a very, very small percentage. Majority of their work is work for county operations.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. Next item, please.
Referral 20-0381, authorized contracts with Arcadis of New York, Inc. and Day Engineering PC for pump station engineering term services.
Moved by legislator Brew, seconded by legislator Marionetti. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Item carries. Next item, please.
Referral 20-0383, authorize a contract with Clean Harbors Environmental Services, Inc. to collect, transport, and dispose of household hazardous waste to support the Monroe County Pure Waters Industrial Waste Program.
Moved by legislator Marionetti and seconded by legislator Dondorfer. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item carries. Next item, please.
Referral 20-0385, increase and improvement of facilities in the Rochester Pure Waters District General Collection System and Treatment Plan improvements, and amend the proposed 2021 capital budget and authorize an appropriation transfer.
Moved by legislator Dondorfer, seconded by legislator Brew. Any discussion?
Legislator Barros?
Legislator Barrow, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Through your administration, and this holds true for the next couple referrals as well, I'm going to ask it once. Why is forming and I'm saying this in quotations, an increase in improvement of facilities in the Rochester Pure Waters District necessary? Is this superimposing an additional district or what? What is this exactly? Through the chair.
Through Mr. Vice Chairman, as you recall, annually when Pure Waters is looking to have its capital budget approved, we need to follow state law, which requires us to assess an increase in improvement of facilities when we're undertaking capital projects, whether they're funded by cash capital or we're taking on debt. So that's why you see Pure Waters capital budget separate from the county capital budget, which is presented in December. This follows a separate path. It always has, and again, it's a requirement through state law that we follow this process and have a public hearing.
Okay, thank you very much.
Is there any further discussion?
Legislator Mafucci, I have one quick question.
Yes,
Not
legislator.
that I
Go
want to
ahead.
prolong the meeting. So this is why we get Pure Waters charges later in the budget process, through the chair of the administration.
Through you, Mr. Vice Chairman, the Pure Water scale of charges for our operating budget is presented concurrent with the budget submission. But this is why you've typically seen in the past where we have the increase in improvements come forward. Sometimes it's in the first quarter of the next year or in the year that we're asking for it to be approved. That's where you've seen what Director Franklin was referring to, where we have to estimate the potential impact on rates for residents. In this case, all four of these are relying on cash capital. Again, Director Franklin referred to those that are in the operating budget, but we have to go through this process to stay compliant with state law.
Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Next item, please.
Referral 20-0387, increase in improvement of facilities in the Gates Chi Ogden Sewer District, general collection system improvements, and amend the proposed 2021 capital budget and authorize an appropriation transfer.
Moved by legislator Brew, seconded by legislator Marionetti. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Next item, please.
Referral 20-0389, increase in improvement of facilities in the Arundecoit Bay South Central Pure Waters District, general pump station, interceptor improvements, and amend the proposed 2021 capital budget and authorize an appropriation transfer.
Moved by Chairman Dondorfer, seconded by legislator Brew. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The item carries. And next item, please.
Referral 20-0391, increase in improvement of facilities in the Northwest Quadrant Pure Waters District, general pump station, interceptor and treatment plant improvements, and amend the proposed 2021 capital budget and authorize an appropriation transfer.
Moved by legislator Brew, seconded by legislator Marionetti. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? The item carries. And the next item, please.
Referral 20-0393, authorize a contract with Bergman Associates Architects, Engineers, Landscape Architects, and Surveyors, DPC, for professional design services for the Monroe County Climate Action Plan.
Moved by legislator Marionetti, seconded by legislator Udelson. Any discussion?
Legislator Dondorfer?
Yes, legislator.
I just have a quick question through the chair to the administration. Is the Climate Action Plan Advisory Committee unanimous in their support of this?
Through you, Mr. Vice Chairman, yes, they were.
Great, and thank you. And through the chair to the administration, has Bergman worked with any other climate action plans? And if so, for what municipalities and organizations, if you know that?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chairman, the City of Rochester, and their sub has also worked on several others around the country.
Great, thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Item carries. Next item, please.
Referral 20-0397, classification of action, determination of significance pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act for the sale of county-owned tax foreclosure property located at Picture Parkway in the town of Webster.
Moved by legislator Brew and seconded by legislator Marionetti. Is there any discussion?
As Josh Barth.
Yes, legislator, you have the floor.
Thank you. Through you to the administration, do we know what the town of Webster is going to do with this property?
Is Tim Murphy on? He's supposed to be on.
I believe we have Tim Murphy on the call. Okay, maybe we don't. If you could hold on one moment, Mr. Chairman, we have someone here.
Through the Vice Chair, this is Laura Smith, Chief Deputy County Attorney. We're not completely clear on the town of Webster's plans. This is contiguous to their DPW facility. We believe they have plans of incorporating it into their DPW campus, but they don't have firm plans at this time.
Okay, thank you. And how long have you had this property, through the chair?
I believe we just acquired it in 2020.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? The item carries. And next item, please.
Referral 20-0399.
Moved by
Classification of action, determination of significance pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act for the sale of county-owned tax foreclosure property located on State Street in the town of Wheatland.
Moved by legislator Brew, seconded by legislator Baroff.
Mr.
Is
Chairman?
there any discussion?
Yes,
Yes, legislator Baroff.
thank you. Through you to the administration, when did we acquire this property?
Through you, Mr. Vice Chair, the vacant land was acquired in November of 1995 through tax foreclosure.
Okay, and through the chair to the administration, and I'm assuming we've done nothing with it since then, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and through the chair to the administration, last question, do we know what is going to be done with this perhaps, or we don't know?
It is a small sliver of property, and I believe the neighboring property is acquiring the property. However, I'll also note the actual acquisition of the property will be before the Ways and Means Committee, December 3rd. This particular review is specific to seeker, so there might be additional information that could be asked of the Director of Real Property at the Ways and Means Committee on December 3rd.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
Is there any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? The item passes. Next item, please.
Referral 20-0403, classification of action, determination of significance pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act for the Greater Rochester International Airport off-airport tree obstruction removal, runway 10-28.
Moved by Vice President Marionetti and seconded by legislator Mafucci. Is there any discussion?
Legislator Brew?
Yes, legislator Brew, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you. Has county planning reviewed this and actually agreed with the negative declaration for the seeker? I do see it does involve some removal of trees since seeker is pretty much provided for any type of impact on the environment. I just wanted to make sure that county planning had an opportunity to look at this and in fact had agreed with the seeker recommendation to this legislative body.
Yes, Legislator Brew, this is Pat Gooch from County Planning Department. We have reviewed this referral or this seeker, and yes, we have determined that it is a negative declaration. This is a routine maintenance issue that the FAA requires of all airports.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Is there any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? The item passes. Next item, please.
Final item, referral 20-0404, classification of action, designation of lead agency, and determination of significance pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act, seeker for the Salt Road Phase Rehabilitation Project.
Moved by legislator Dondorfer and seconded by legislator Brew. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries.
The actual last item, referral 20-0405, classification of action, designation of lead agency, and determination of significance pursuant to State Environmental Quality Review Act for Lake Road Phase 2 Highway Rehabilitation Project.
Moved by legislator Brew and seconded by legislator Marionetti. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Item carries. And that was it. Are there any other matters to come before this committee?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I got two matters. One, I just want to say happy Thanksgiving to all. Thank you all for your work. I really do appreciate the fact that there are so many, staff online, people working to, go through the budget, and it's, sometimes a tedious process, but I appreciate the fact that people worked on it. I just want to say thank you for all those efforts. The other thing I wanted to request of the chair, Chair Dondorf, although I know today you're vice chair, is that we look into why there's no members of the Black and Asian Democratic Caucus on this committee. This is the case. This is the only committee where there are no members of that caucus present, and that seems to me it's inherently unfair. And that something needs to be done about that moving forward. One of the things I promised myself, but in talking to other members of the legislature on all sides of the aisle, is that I want to leave this body in a better place than I found it. I think one way to do that is to ensure that no matter which direction this body goes, it goes in a direction that's better. So, Chairman Dondorf, I would urge you to look into that because this is the only committee that doesn't have representation from all the recognized caucuses in the body. And I say it with all due respect. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Any other matters to come before this committee? Okay, there being no other matters, the November 25th, 2020 meeting of the Environment and Public Works Committee stands adjourned. The next meeting of the Environment and Public Works Committee will be held Wednesday, December 23rd, 5:30 p.m.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving, everybody.